The grill sizzled as Logan flipped a row of burgers, the scent of charred meat wafting through the air. His backyard was alive with laughter and music, a perfect summer afternoon gathering of friends. Someone cracked a joke and Logan chuckled, his spatula in hand. The day couldn't have been more ordinary until the light appeared. At first it was a faint glow, easy to mistake for a trick of the sun. Then it intensified, a shimmering orb descending from the sky with an almost hypnotic hum. Conversations faltered, laughter faded, and one by one, heads tilted toward the spectacle. The music continued to play, an odd juxtaposition to the surreal scene unfolding. "What the hell is that?" Someone whispered, breaking the silence. Logan blinked, spatula frozen midair. He'd always considered himself level-headed, the guy who kept his cool when others panicked. But as the orb solidified into a sleek, metallic craft landing squarely in his backyard, even he struggled to process what was happening. The craft was unlike anything he'd seen, its surface a fluid mirror reflecting the stunned faces of his friends. A hatch slid open with a hiss, releasing a faint, otherworldly mist. Logan's first instinct was to shield his grill, a laughable reflex that somehow brought a sliver of normalcy to the absurdity. Then she emerged. Tall and lithe, the figure stepped out with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. Her skin glowed faintly, silver patterns shimmering along her arms and face. Her eyes, large, iridescent, and filled with an unsettling intelligence, swept over the crowd before locking onto Logan. Her movements were deliberate, almost regal, as if she had rehearsed this moment countless times. Logan's friends scattered, some diving behind furniture, others clutching their phones to record or call for help. Only Logan remained rooted in place, spatula still in hand, heart pounding as the alien approached him. "You are Logan Matthews," she said, her voice melodic yet commanding. It wasn't a question. Yeah," he managed, his voice cracking slightly. "I am Alira," she continued, inclining her head in a gesture that seemed halfway between a bow and a nod. "According to the genetic compatibility matrix of my species, you are my designated mating partner." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, followed by a collective gasp from those brave enough to peek out from their hiding spots. "A mating partner." Logan stammered, his brain refusing to catch up with his ears. "Yes," Alira said simply, as if she had announced the weather. "Your genetic profile has been identified as optimal for the continuation of my species." Logan opened his mouth, then closed it, unsure whether to laugh, run, or pinch himself awake from what had to be a bizarre dream. "There's gotta be some mistake," he finally said, glancing around for support that wasn't forthcoming. "There is no mistake," Alira replied, her tone matter-of-fact but not unkind. "Our algorithm is infallible." Logan blinked, then laughed nervously. "Well, I don't know what kind of algorithm you're using, but I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm just..." He gestured vaguely at the grill. "A guy making burgers." Alira tilted her head, her glowing patterns shifting slightly as if reacting to her thoughts. "You underestimate your importance, Logan Matthews. Your presence is required for the survival of my people. You must accompany me to my planet for the bonding process." The words sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the onlookers. Someone muttered, "This is better than any movie I've ever seen." "Okay, hold up," Logan said, raising his hands. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but you can't just show up at someone's BBQ and, what did you call it, bond with them. That's not how we do things here." Alira blinked, her expression inscrutable. "How do you do things here?" "For starters, we ask people if they want to be bonded," Logan said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "It's called consent." A flicker of something passed over Alira's face, confusion, maybe curiosity. "Consent, an intriguing concept. Among my people, compatibility dictates necessity. There is no question of want." "Well, among my people, it's everything," Logan shot back, folding his arms. "So sorry, but I'm not going anywhere with you." The The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the grill Logan had forgotten to turn off. Alira studied him, her iridescent eyes narrowing slightly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of her lips. "I see," she said softly. "Your species values autonomy. Fascinating." Before Logan could respond, she raised a slender hand and a small device materialized from her wrist. A holographic projection sprang to life, displaying a desolate, barren landscape. "This is my home," Alira said, her voice quieter now, almost mournful. "A world on the brink of collapse. Without the bonding process, we will not survive." Logan stared at the image, a pang of something he couldn't quite name twisting in his chest. He didn't know this woman or alien or whatever she was, but the grief in her voice was undeniable. "I don't understand," he said after a moment. "Why me? Out of everyone on Earth, why did your Matrix pick me?" Alira stepped closer, the glow of her markings casting faint light across his face. "Because Logan Matthews," she said, her tone both solemn and resolute, "you possess qualities that no algorithm can fully quantify. You are not just compatible, you are exceptional." Logan swallowed hard, caught somewhere between disbelief and reluctant intrigue. Behind him, the burgers began to burn. The smell of charred meat finally jolted Logan from his trance. He turned abruptly, shutting off the grill and muttering, "Great, now my burgers are ruined too." It wasn't much, but it was the only piece of normalcy he could cling to as his brain scrambled to catch up. Behind him, Alira remained silent, watching him with an unnerving intensity. Her posture was poised, her glowing patterns shifting faintly like ripples on water. Logan's friends whispered among themselves, some brave enough to peek around corners or behind furniture. A couple had even started recording on their phones. "Okay, let's try this again," Logan said, turning back to her, spatula still in hand like it was some kind of makeshift weapon. "Let's assume for a second that this isn't the most elaborate prank anyone's ever pulled on me. What exactly are you expecting me to do here?" "I am expecting you to fulfill your role as my bonded partner," Alira replied evenly. "Your genetic contribution, combined with mine, will create a new lineage capable of adapting to the environmental collapse of my world. Together, we will ensure the survival of my species." Logan stared at her, blinking. "Right. Because that totally clears things up." Alira tilted her head as if trying to decipher his sarcasm. "If this arrangement is unclear, I can provide additional information about the process." Logan held up a hand. "No, no more details. I'm already regretting asking." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, Alira, or whatever your name is, I'm not some cosmic savior. I'm just a guy who likes BBQs and avoids confrontation whenever possible. You've got the wrong man. You underestimate yourself," she said, stepping closer. Logan took an instinctive step back, bumping into the grill. "Our algorithms are precise. Your resilience, resourcefulness, and capacity for empathy make you uniquely suited for this responsibility." He gave a dry laugh. "You got all that from an algorithm. I don't even think my exes would agree with you on half of those points." Alira's expression shifted ever so slightly, a faint crease forming between her brows. "Exes, you know, former relationships, people I dated, never mind." He waved it off, realizing this was a rabbit hole he didn't want to go down. "The point is, I'm not interested in being part of your bonding thing. I've got my own life and it's staying right here on Earth." Alira's glowing markings dimmed slightly, and for the first time she looked almost uncertain. "You would refuse to help an entire species survive?" The question hit him harder than he expected. "It's not that simple," he said, softening his tone. "You're asking me to leave everything I've ever known. My friends, my family, my home. You can't just show up out of nowhere and expect me to drop everything." Alira studied him in silence for a long moment, her gaze unreadable. Then she raised her wrist again, activating the holographic display. The image of her desolate planet reappeared, its surface cracked and barren, its skies choked with ash. "This is what remains of Valara," she said quietly. "Our resources are depleted, our atmosphere is failing. Without adaptation, my people will not survive another decade." Logan felt a pang of guilt despite himself. The images were haunting, the kind of thing that would have had him reaching for his wallet during a late-night charity commercial. But this wasn't just a donation she was asking for. This was his entire life. "I get it," he said finally. "Your situation sucks, but I'm not sure I'm the guy to fix it." "Your doubt is understandable," Alira said, her tone unexpectedly gentle. "Humans value individuality in a way my people do not. It is an admirable trait, but it also complicates matters. Perhaps," she paused, her eyes narrowing slightly in thought, "perhaps you require further evidence of our compatibility." "Further evidence," Logan repeated warily. Before he could ask what she meant, Alira tapped her wrist device again. The craft behind her emitted a soft hum and a beam of light shot out, enveloping Logan in a faint, golden glow. He flinched, instinctively throwing up his hands. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Relax," Alira said calmly. "This is a non-invasive diagnostic scan. It will allow you to witness the data that confirms our compatibility." "I didn't consent to this either." He snapped, though he didn't feel any pain or discomfort. The glow faded, and a new projection appeared between them. A swirling array of symbols and graphs that meant nothing to Logan. Alira examined it, nodding in satisfaction. "As I suspected, your neurological and physiological markers are exceptionally well suited to the bonding process. Your genetic diversity will provide the necessary adaptation for our progeny." Logan groaned, dragging a hand down his face. "You keep saying things like progeny, and it's not making this sound any better." Alira frowned. "Do humans not prioritize the survival of their offspring?" "Sure, but usually we decide when and how that happens," he shot back. "And it's not with someone who just crashes our backyard BBQ uninvited." The faintest hint of amusement flickered in Alira's iridescent eyes. "I see. Your customs are more intricate than I anticipated." "Yeah, well, welcome to Earth," Logan muttered, crossing his arms. "We're complicated like that." For the first time, Alira hesitated, as if weighing her next words carefully. "Logan Matthews," she said softly, "I understand your reluctance, but if you will not agree to accompany me willingly, I am left with little choice." His stomach sank. "What do you mean, little choice?" Before she could answer, the craft behind her began to hum louder, its surface rippling like liquid metal. A beam of light shot out, surrounding both of them. "Wait, what's happening?" Logan shouted, panic rising in his chest. "We are departing," Alira said, her voice calm but resolute. "You will have the opportunity to see my world and make an informed decision, but I cannot allow you to dismiss your importance without understanding the gravity of the situation." Logan barely had time to protest before the world around him dissolved into blinding light. The last thing he heard was the collective gasp of his friends, and then everything went silent. Logan's vision blurred as the light around him receded, replaced by a disorienting swirl of colors. His stomach lurched like he'd just stepped off a roller coaster, and he staggered, barely managing to stay upright. When the world settled, he found himself standing in a vast, metallic chamber. The walls glimmered with a faint, pulsing energy, and the air carried a crisp, unfamiliar scent. It was sterile yet oddly calming, like standing in a field after a rainstorm. "What just happened?" he demanded, turning to Alira, who stood unperturbed beside him. "We have boarded my vessel," she said simply, gesturing toward a translucent wall that revealed the void of space. Beyond it, stars stretched in every direction, a breathtaking expanse that made Logan's stomach flip again. He pressed a hand to his forehead. "You've got to be kidding me. You abducted me." "I prefer to think of it as ensuring your cooperation," Alira replied, her tone diplomatic. "You are not a prisoner, Logan Matthews. You are a guest, And as my guest, I will ensure your safety and comfort." Logan let out a bitter laugh, pacing the room. "Comfort? You just teleported me onto a spaceship without warning. That's not exactly comforting." Alira watched him with a calm intensity, her hands clasped behind her back. "Your reaction is understandable," she said after a moment. "Change is often met with resistance. But I assure you, once you see Valara and understand the stakes, you will recognize the necessity of your role." "Valara, that's your planet, right?" Logan asked, stopping mid-pace. "Yes," Alira said, her expression softening. "And it is a place worth saving despite its current state." Logan hesitated, caught between his frustration and a flicker of curiosity. He'd never been one to back down from an argument, but there was something in Alira's tone, an undercurrent of vulnerability she hadn't shown before. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "Show me. Show me what's so important that you had to kidnap me to prove your point." Alira inclined her head, the faint glow of her markings brightening. "Follow me." She led him down a corridor that seemed to shift and ripple as they walked, the walls adjusting to their presence. Logan tried not to let his awe show, but the technology was unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Every surface seemed alive, responding to Alira's subtle gestures and commands. "Your ship is something else," he admitted grudgingly. "Our vessels are designed to be symbiotic," Alira explained. "They adapt to the needs of their occupants, much like the bonding process adapts to ensure compatibility." Logan rolled his eyes. "Yeah, you keep bringing up the bonding thing. Still not sold on that, by the way." Alira's lips twitched, a faint hint of amusement breaking through her stoic demeanor. "I did not expect you to be," she said. They arrived at a larger chamber where a circular platform rose from the floor. Alira stepped onto it, motioning for Logan to do the same. He hesitated but eventually followed, his curiosity outweighing his lingering frustration. The platform glowed, and a holographic projection filled the air around them. Logan's breath caught as he saw Valara up close for the first time. The planet was a desolate wasteland, its surface scarred by massive fissures and craters. Storms raged across its atmosphere, churning black clouds shot through with eerie green lightning. Rivers of molten lava snaked through the terrain, and in the distance, the skeletal remains of cities jutted up like broken teeth. "This is what remains of my home," Alira said softly, her gaze fixed on the projection. "Centuries of environmental collapse, resource depletion, and internal conflict have brought us to the brink of extinction. Our population has dwindled to a fraction of what it once was." Logan swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in as he stared at the devastation. "How did it get this bad?" "A combination of arrogance and short-sightedness," Alira said bitterly. "We believed ourselves invincible, that our technology could solve any problem. But by the time we realized the consequences of our actions, it was too late. Now, only the bonding process offers a chance to adapt and survive." Logan's brow furrowed as he processed her explanation. He couldn't deny the grim reality of what he was seeing, but the idea of being roped into saving an alien species still felt surreal. "And you think I'm the answer to all this?" he asked, gesturing at the hologram. "You are part of the answer," Alira said, turning to face him. "Your genetic diversity, combined with ours, could create a new lineage capable of thriving in even the harshest environments. It is not just about survival, it is about evolution." Logan shook his head. "I'm just one guy. How do you know it'll even work?" Alira stepped closer, her glowing patterns shifting in a way that felt almost reassuring. "Because, Logan Matthews, you embody qualities that transcend mere genetics. Resilience, ingenuity, compassion. These traits are as vital as any biological marker." Her words struck a chord he hadn't expected, leaving him momentarily speechless. He wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or overwhelmed. Before he could respond, the platform shifted and the hologram dissolved. Alira gestured toward a nearby viewport, where Valara loomed in the distance, its surface a patchwork of ruin and turmoil. "We are approaching the planet," she said. "Once we land, you will see firsthand why your role is so important." Logan stared out at the desolate world, a mix of dread and curiosity swirling in his chest. He still didn't fully understand why this was happening to him, but one thing was certain: there was no turning back now. The descent to Valara was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Logan stood by the viewport, watching as the ship pierced through the turbulent atmosphere. Green lightning flashed across the churning black skies, illuminating the planet's scarred surface below. The ground seemed alive, shifting and cracking as if it were breathing. "This is insane," Logan muttered under his breath. Alira stood beside him, her posture as steady and composed as ever. "Valara has become unstable," she said. "Our environmental systems can no longer maintain balance. Even now, the core of the planet is destabilizing." "Sounds like your whole world is on life support," Logan replied. She inclined her head slightly. "An apt analogy, and one that underscores the urgency of our mission." Logan didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the ruins that became clearer as they approached. The skeletal remains of massive structures sprawled across the horizon, their sharp, jagged edges hinting at a once thriving civilization now reduced to rubble. The ship landed with a faint hum, its symbiotic systems anchoring it to the unstable ground. As the entry hatch opened, a blast of hot, acrid air rushed in, making Logan cough. "Whoa, is the air even breathable here?" he asked, covering his mouth and nose instinctively. "For a limited time," Alira said, handing him a small, sleek device that looked like a cross between a necklace and a collar. "This will filter the atmosphere for you." Logan eyed the device warily. "And this isn't going to choke me or implant some alien tracking chip, right?" Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "You have my word, it is merely a filtration device." With a reluctant sigh, Logan slipped it around his neck. A soft click confirmed it had activated, and the air immediately felt cleaner. "All right, let's do this." They stepped out of the ship, the ground beneath them crunching like brittle glass. The heat was oppressive, and the air shimmered with a faint, toxic haze. "This way," Alira said, leading him toward the ruins of what appeared to be a massive, domed structure. Logan followed, doing his best to keep up as the ground shifted unpredictably beneath his feet. He noticed that Alira moved with an effortless grace, her steps precise and deliberate. It was a stark contrast to his own awkward footing, but he refused to complain. As they entered the ruins, Logan's eyes widened. Inside, the remnants of an advanced civilization lay scattered. Shattered consoles, faded holographic displays, and strange alien symbols adorned the walls. Despite the decay, there was an undeniable beauty to the architecture, as though the very essence of the culture still lingered. "This was once a central hub of knowledge," Alira explained, her voice tinged with melancholy. "A place where our greatest minds gathered to solve the challenges of our time. Now it is a tomb." Logan ran a hand over a broken console, the surface smooth and cool despite the heat outside. "What happened here?" "A cascade of failures," she said, her gaze distant. "We underestimated the impact of our actions. We relied too heavily on technology to fix our mistakes, never addressing the root causes. By the time we realized the extent of the damage, it was too late." He turned to her, surprised by the raw emotion in her voice. "And now you're pinning all your hopes on me." Alira met his gaze, her eyes shimmering faintly. "Not all our hopes, but enough to make this risk necessary." Logan wanted to argue, to push back against the weight she was placing on his shoulders, but something about her expression stopped him. There was a vulnerability there, buried beneath her stoic exterior, and it stirred something unexpected in him. "Fine," he said, exhaling sharply. "I'm here now. What do you need me to do?" Alira gestured toward a central console that still flickered faintly with life. There is a repository of genetic data stored within this facility. It contains the remaining viable samples of our species, along with the algorithms needed to initiate the bonding process. Logan raised an eyebrow. So what? You plug me into your system and we save the day. It is not so simple, she replied. The process requires synchronization between our genetic codes. Your willingness to cooperate will enhance the likelihood of success. He snorted. Willingness, huh? Kind of ironic, considering you didn't exactly give me a choice. Alira hesitated, her markings dimming slightly. Perhaps I was overly assertive in my approach. For that, I apologize. But the urgency of our situation left me little room for alternatives. Logan studied her for a moment, surprised by the sincerity in her tone. It wasn't exactly a perfect apology, but it was a start. Okay, he said, stepping toward the console. Let's get this over with. Alira moved beside him, her hands gliding over the interface with practiced precision. The console hummed to life, and a series of holographic displays appeared, filled with incomprehensible symbols and graphs. Place your hand here, she instructed, indicating a glowing panel. Logan hesitated but eventually complied, pressing his palm against the cool surface. A soft pulse of energy traveled up his arm, making him shiver. What's happening? He asked, his voice tight. The system is analyzing your genetic structure, Alira explained. It is assessing compatibility and identifying the optimal parameters for the bonding process. Logan grimaced. You make it sound so clinical. She glanced at him, her expression softening. It is more than clinical, Logan. It is the merging of two paths into one, a union that carries the potential to reshape the future. Her words hung in the air, heavier than he was ready to handle. He looked away, focusing on the glowing interface instead. Suddenly, the console emitted a sharp beep, and Alira's expression shifted to one of concern. What is it? Logan asked, his stomach twisting. The synchronization is incomplete, she said, her voice tense. Something is interfering with the process. Before he could respond, the ground beneath them rumbled violently, and a low, guttural roar echoed through the ruins. Logan's eyes widened as the walls trembled, dust and debris raining down around them. What the hell was that? He shouted. Alira's markings flared brightly, her stance shifting into one of alert readiness. We are not alone, she said grimly. Prepare yourself, Logan Matthews. This is where your resilience will be tested. The roar grew louder, reverberating through the ruins like a primal warning. Logan's heart pounded as the ground trembled beneath his feet. What's out there? He asked, his voice barely steady. Alira's glowing patterns pulsed sharply, a sign of her heightened focus. A predator, she said, her voice low. One of the many consequences of Valara's collapse. These creatures have adapted to the planet's instability in ways we could not. Great, Logan muttered, his fingers twitching as adrenaline surged through him. And I'm supposed to help you fight it with what? My charming personality. Alira reached into a compartment on her suit and withdrew a sleek, alien weapon that resembled a shimmering staff. Stay close, she said, handing him a smaller device that looked like a metallic gauntlet. What am I supposed to do with this? He asked, slipping it on. It will generate a protective field, Alira explained, but only for a short duration. Use it wisely. Before Logan could ask for further clarification, the creature appeared, bursting through a crumbled wall. It was massive, its body a grotesque amalgamation of sinew and bone. Its glowing eyes locked onto them with predatory intent, and its elongated limbs scraped against the floor as it advanced. Fantastic, Logan muttered, instinctively stepping back. What is that thing? A Ravager, Alira said, her voice steely. Stay behind me. The creature lunged with startling speed, but Alira was faster. Her staff ignited with a burst of energy, and she struck the ground in front of the Ravager, sending a shockwave rippling through the air. The creature staggered but didn't retreat, letting out an enraged shriek. Logan stumbled back, his protective instincts warring with his desire to stay as far from the fight as possible. "You've done this before, right?" he called out. "Many times," Alira replied, her focus unbroken. She moved with fluid precision, dodging the creature's swipes and countering with calculated strikes, but the Ravager was relentless. It leaped, landing with enough force to shake the ground. The impact knocked Logan off balance, and he barely managed to activate the gauntlet's shield in time as a chunk of debris flew toward him. The shield absorbed the blow, shimmering briefly before fading. Logan scrambled to his feet, his heart racing. This thing's not gonna hold up for long. Alira darted toward him, positioning herself between Logan and the creature. "I will draw its attention," she said. "You find a way to reactivate the synchronization process." "What? Are you serious?" he shouted. Alira's gaze bore into him, resolute. "You are more resourceful than you realize, Logan Matthews. Trust yourself." He wanted to argue, but there was no time. The Ravager lunged again, and Alira met it head-on, her staff crackling with energy. Logan turned toward the console, his mind racing. He had no idea how to fix alien technology, but if Alira believed in him, he had to try. He placed his hand on the glowing panel again, hoping for some kind of response. The interface flickered to life, lines of alien symbols scrolling rapidly. Logan clenched his jaw, scanning the display for anything that resembled a problem he could solve. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Think, what would they do in the movies?" He spotted a section of the interface that seemed to display error codes. One line stood out, highlighted in red, and he guessed it was the source of the problem. Next to it was a faintly glowing symbol that looked like a circuit. "Let's hope this isn't the self-destruct button," Logan said, tapping the symbol. The console emitted a low hum and the error code disappeared. Logan's pulse quickened as the holographic display reappeared, showing the synchronization process resuming. "I think I got it," he shouted. Alira didn't respond, too focused on the Ravager. The creature's movements were erratic now, its patience wearing thin. It lashed out wildly, and one of its massive claws grazed Alira, sending her sprawling to the ground. "Alira!" Logan yelled, panic surging through him. She rolled to her feet, clutching her side but refusing to falter. Her markings glowed fiercely as she raised her staff again. "It is almost done," she called back. "Stay focused." Logan turned back to the console, watching as the synchronization bar crept closer to completion. The process felt agonizingly slow, every second stretching into an eternity. Behind him, the Ravager let out another guttural roar. Logan risked a glance and saw it towering over Alira, poised to strike. Without thinking, he grabbed a piece of debris and hurled it at the creature. "Hey, over here!" he shouted. The Ravager turned toward him, its glowing eyes narrowing. Logan's heart nearly stopped as it started to advance on him instead. "What am I doing?" he muttered, backing away slowly. Alira seized the opportunity. She lunged at the creature, driving her staff into its side. The weapon discharged a massive burst of energy, and the Ravager let out a deafening screech. It collapsed, its body convulsing before finally going still. Logan let out a shaky breath, his legs threatening to give out beneath him. "Is it dead?" he asked. Alira straightened, her glowing patterns dimming slightly. "For now." The console emitted a soft chime, and Logan turned to see the synchronization process complete. He looked at Alira, relief and exhaustion flooding him in equal measure. "Did I just save the day?" he asked, a weak grin tugging at his lips. "You contributed significantly," Alira said, her tone lighter than usual. Logan laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "I'll take it." Alira approached him, her gaze steady. "Your actions today proved something important, Logan Matthews. You are more than capable of standing beside me in this endeavor." He met her eyes, surprised by the warmth in her expression. "Guess we make a good team," he said. "Indeed," she replied softly. "And this is only the beginning." The synchronization process initiated almost immediately after the console's chime, filling the room with a resonant hum. The air seemed to thrum with energy, and Logan felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest. "What's happening now?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Alira stepped beside him, her posture regal despite the obvious exhaustion from the battle. Her markings pulsed in sync with the console's glow, creating a hypnotic rhythm. "The bonding process has begun," she said. "Your genetic structure is merging with the algorithm, creating a stable core for Valara's restoration." Logan frowned, instinctively placing a hand over his chest. "Merging? You mean this thing is changing me?" "Not physically," Alira said quickly, sensing his unease. "The changes are more metaphysical. Your essence will harmonize with Valara's systems, allowing you to act as a stabilizing force. It is a profound honor among my people." "Yeah, well, honor or not, a little heads up would have been nice," Logan muttered, trying to steady his breathing. The glow from the console intensified, casting intricate patterns of light across the ruins. Alira placed her hand on the interface, and a soft melody filled the air, as if the planet itself were singing. Logan glanced at her, noting the almost serene expression on her face. "Is it supposed to feel weird?" he asked. Alira turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "What do you feel?" Logan hesitated. The warmth in his chest had grown into something more complex, a mixture of emotions he couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the adrenaline or the relief of surviving the Ravager. It was something deeper, something connected to Alira and the planet around them. "Like, I'm plugged into something bigger than me," he said finally. "It's overwhelming, but also kind of beautiful." Alira's expression softened, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "That is the essence of Valara. You are beginning to understand." The moment was interrupted by a sudden tremor, more violent than any before. Logan stumbled, barely catching himself against the console. "What now?" he asked, his voice sharp with alarm. Alira's markings flared brighter as she scanned the holographic display. "The planet's core is destabilizing faster than anticipated. The synchronization must reach full completion before the restoration process can begin. And if it doesn't, then Valara will collapse entirely and everything we've done will be for nothing," she said grimly. Logan's mind raced. "Is there anything I can do to speed this up?" Alira hesitated, clearly weighing her options. "There is a fail-safe mechanism within the facility," she said. "A manual override that could accelerate the process, but it is located in the central chamber, deep within the ruins." "Of course it is," Logan muttered. "And I'm guessing it's not as simple as flipping a switch." "There may be." "Resistance," Alira admitted. "Resistance," he repeated. "You mean more of those Ravager things?" She nodded solemnly. "They are drawn to the energy emitted during synchronization. The deeper we go, the more likely we are to encounter them." Logan exhaled sharply, his hand instinctively tightening into a fist. "All right then, lead the way." Alira tilted her head, surprised by his resolve. "You do not have to come. I can handle this alone." "Yeah, that's not happening," Logan said. "If this whole bonding thing means I'm part of the team now, then I'm not sitting on the sidelines. Besides, I'm pretty sure you'd get bored without me." For a moment, Alira simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she inclined her head, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of respect. "Very well, let us proceed." The journey to the central chamber was fraught with tension. The ruins grew darker and more labyrinthine as they descended, the air thick with an oppressive heat. Logan kept his gauntlet active, its faint glow providing a sliver of light in the shadows. "How much farther?" he asked, his voice echoing faintly. "We are close," Alira replied, her voice steady. "The chamber lies just beyond this corridor." As they rounded a corner, the ground beneath them quaked violently. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls and a deafening roar erupted from ahead. "Let me guess," Logan said, grimacing. "More Ravagers?" Alira nodded, her staff igniting with a sharp burst of energy. "Be ready." Before Logan could reply, two Ravagers emerged from the shadows, their glowing eyes locked onto the intruders. They were smaller than the one they'd faced earlier, but their movements were faster, more erratic. "Fantastic," Logan muttered, raising his shield. The creatures lunged simultaneously, forcing Logan and Alira to split up. Alira moved with her usual precision, her staff crackling as she deflected one Ravager's claws. Logan, meanwhile, found himself dodging clumsily as the second creature bore down on him. "Any advice?" he shouted, narrowly avoiding a swipe. "Do not let it corner you," Alira called back. "Gee, thanks for the tip." Logan gritted his teeth, scanning his surroundings for anything he could use. His eyes landed on a crumbled pillar precariously balanced above the Ravager. Acting on instinct, he activated his shield and charged forward, baiting the creature into position. "Come on, ugly," he muttered. The Ravager lunged and Logan dove out of the way at the last second, slamming his shield into the base of the pillar. The structure collapsed, crushing the creature beneath it with a bone-rattling crash. "Yeah," Logan shouted, pumping his fist. Alira dispatched her opponent with a final, decisive strike, then turned to Logan with an approving nod. "Impressive," she said. "Thanks," Logan said, grinning despite himself. "I'm starting to get the hang of this alien adventure thing." They pressed on, finally reaching the central chamber. The fail-safe mechanism stood at the center of the room, a towering, intricate device pulsing with energy. "That's it?" Logan asked, approaching cautiously. "Yes," Alira said, "but activating it will require precise timing. Once the sequence begins, there will be no turning back." Logan met her gaze, his resolve unwavering. "Then let's finish this." Together they stepped forward, their partnership solidified by the trials they had faced. Logan and Alira approached the towering fail-safe mechanism, its pulsing energy casting erratic shadows on the chamber walls. The rhythmic hum emanating from it was nearly deafening, vibrating through the air and their very bones. "What exactly do I need to do?" Logan asked, his voice barely audible over the sound. Alira placed her hand on the console embedded into the mechanism. Symbols flared to life, cascading across the display. "The mechanism requires a dual input to activate. One sequence must be entered by me, the other by you." Logan raised an eyebrow, glancing at the array of alien symbols. "You want me to type in alien code?" "Alira, I barely passed high school geometry. This looks like an SAT from hell." "You do not need to understand the symbols," Alira reassured him. "Your connection to Valara's energy network will guide you. Trust your instincts." "Trust my instincts," Logan muttered, shaking his head. "Sure, why not? It's not like the planet's life depends on this or anything." Alira's gaze softened slightly. "You have proven yourself capable, Logan. I have no doubt you will succeed." Her words steadied him. Taking a deep breath, Logan placed his hand on the console opposite hers. A faint warmth spread through his fingertips, and suddenly, the symbols on the display began to shift and align, forming patterns he somehow understood. "Okay," he said, focusing intently. "I think I've got this." As he worked, Alira initiated her sequence, her movements precise and deliberate. The mechanism began to respond, its glow intensifying as the synchronization process accelerated. But the peace didn't last. A guttural roar echoed from the corridor behind them and Logan froze. "Don't tell me, more Ravagers," Alira confirmed, her tone grim. "The energy surge is attracting them." Logan glanced at her, panic creeping into his voice. "How many?" The ground shook violently, and the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against stone filled the chamber. Alira's glowing patterns flared brighter as she gripped her staff. "Enough to make this difficult," she said. "Fantastic," Logan muttered, his heart pounding. "Can this thing speed up at all?" "The process cannot be rushed," Alira said. "But if we abandon it now, the synchronization will fail." Logan's mind raced. They were outnumbered, and if they left the console, everything they'd worked for would be lost. "We're staying," he said firmly. Alira glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You are certain?" "Nope," Logan admitted. "But I didn't come all this way to quit now." The first Ravager burst into the chamber, its monstrous form illuminated by the mechanism's glow. It was followed by another and then another until the room seemed overrun. "Logan, keep focusing on your sequence," Alira shouted, moving to intercept the creatures. Her staff ignited with a sharp crackle as she struck the closest Ravager, driving it back. Logan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay at the console. His fingers moved instinctively over the alien symbols, guided by a force he didn't fully understand. "You're doing great," he muttered to himself, sweat dripping down his face. "Just don't screw this up." Behind him, the sound of Alira's staff colliding with the Ravager's claws was deafening. She moved with a ferocity he hadn't seen before, her strikes precise and unrelenting. But no matter how many creatures she defeated, more seemed to take their place. One Ravager broke through her defenses, its glowing eyes fixed on Logan. Alira," Logan shouted, panic surging through him. Alira turned, her expression fierce. She hurled a pulse of energy from her staff, striking the creature before it could reach Logan. It collapsed in a heap, but the effort left her visibly drained. "I cannot hold them off indefinitely," she warned. Logan's hands flew across the console, desperation fueling his movements. The symbols on the display began to pulse in sync with the mechanism, indicating that the sequence was nearly complete. "Just a little longer," he called out. A Ravager leaped toward Alira, its claws aimed directly at her chest. She dodged at the last moment, countering with a powerful strike that sent it crashing into a wall. But the impact left her off balance and another creature lunged at her from behind. Without thinking, Logan abandoned the console and grabbed a piece of debris, hurling it at the Ravager. The improvised weapon struck the creature, momentarily distracting it. "Logan, no," Alira shouted. "I'm fine," he yelled back, scrambling to grab another piece of rubble. "Just keep fighting." The Ravager snarled, turning its attention to him. Logan braced himself, activating his gauntlet's shield. The creature charged, slamming into the shield with enough force to knock him to the ground. "Not how I wanted to go out," Logan muttered, scrambling backward as the Ravager loomed over him. Before it could strike, Alira appeared, driving her staff into its side with a furious cry. The creature let out a final, guttural roar before collapsing. "Are you injured?" Alira asked, pulling Logan to his feet. "Nothing I can't walk off," he said, though his voice shook. "Go, finish it." Alira hesitated for the briefest moment before returning to her console. Logan followed, resuming his sequence with renewed determination. The mechanism's glow reached a blinding intensity, and a resonant chime filled the chamber. The synchronization was complete. "It's done," Logan shouted, relief flooding him. The energy from the mechanism erupted outward, washing over the chamber and the ruins beyond. The Ravagers froze, their glowing eyes dimming before they collapsed, lifeless. Logan and Alira stood in silence, the weight of what they had accomplished settling over them. "Did we just save a planet?" Logan asked, his voice filled with awe. Alira turned to him, her expression softening. "We did," she said, "together." For the first time, Logan allowed himself a smile that wasn't tinged with fear or sarcasm. "Not bad for a barbecue gone wrong," he said. Alira's laughter was quiet but genuine, a sound that Logan found himself wanting to hear again. The chamber grew quiet, the hum of the mechanism fading into a soft, rhythmic pulse that felt almost like the heartbeat of the planet. Logan and Alira stood together, catching their breath as the reality of their victory sank in. "Okay," Logan said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "What now?" "Is there, like, an after-party for saving Valara?" Alira gave him a sidelong glance, her markings still faintly glowing. "Our work is not yet finished. The restoration process has begun, but the stabilization must be monitored closely. Valara's core will require time to heal fully." "So, no cake," Logan joked, but his voice carried a tinge of exhaustion. Alira tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I am unfamiliar with this Earth custom, but perhaps there will be time for celebration later." As they spoke, the console emitted a low chime. Alira stepped forward, examining the display. Her expression shifted, a mixture of relief and sadness crossing her face. "What is it?" Logan asked, stepping closer. "The mechanism has completed its assessment," she said. "Valara's core will stabilize, but the damage to the surface is irreversible. Much of what once existed here is lost forever." Logan's shoulders sagged. "So we won, but—" "Not really." Alira turned to him, her gaze steady. "The fact that Valara will survive at all is a triumph. It will take centuries, but the planet will regenerate. Life will return, even if it is not as it was before." Logan nodded slowly, his eyes drifting to the ruins around them. "Guess that's something, at least." Alira placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. "You have done more than I could have hoped for, Logan. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Logan felt a warmth rise in his chest, not from the mechanism this time, but from her words. He looked at her, the weight of the past hours reflected in her luminous eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you either. Honestly, I'd have been toast 5 minutes into this whole thing without you." She chuckled softly, and for a moment the tension between them eased. Before they could say more, the ground beneath them rumbled gently. A soft, golden light began to emanate from the walls of the chamber, spreading outward. Logan watched in awe as the ruins seemed to awaken, their jagged edges smoothing and faint patterns reappearing in the stone. "What's happening?" he asked. "The restoration process," Alira explained. "Valara's systems are beginning to rebuild what they can. It is a small step, but a vital one." Logan stepped back, his eyes wide as the chamber seemed to come alive around them. The energy felt warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat from earlier. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Alira nodded, her gaze fixed on the transformation. "This is what we fought for, a chance for Valara to begin anew." They stood in silence for a moment, taking it all in. But as the light spread, Logan felt a pang of uncertainty. "So, what happens now? Do you head back to your people? Do I just go home and pretend this was all a crazy dream?" Alira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "My mission was to save Valara." "That mission is now complete." "Right," Logan said, trying to keep his tone light despite the sinking feeling in his chest. "Guess that means this is where we part ways." Alira hesitated, her gaze softening. "It does not have to be." Logan blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer, her markings glowing faintly in the dim light. "You have proven yourself to be more than just an ally. You have shown courage, resourcefulness, and a deep connection to Valara's essence. If you wish, there is a place for you among my people." Logan's heart raced. The idea was tempting, an adventure beyond anything he'd ever imagined, a chance to explore the stars with someone who had become far more important to him than he cared to admit. But it wasn't an easy choice. Earth was his home, and the thought of leaving it behind, of leaving behind the life he'd known, was daunting. "I don't know," he said finally. "I mean, this has been amazing, terrifying, but amazing. But leaving everything behind, that's a big ask." Alira nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I understand. The decision is not one to be made lightly." She stepped back, giving him space to think. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. After a long pause, Logan looked at her. "If I say yes, what happens next?" Alira's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then your journey will truly begin. There is much you have yet to see, much you have yet to learn, and I would be honored to guide you." Logan felt a small, reluctant smile tug at his own lips. "You make a pretty compelling pitch, you know that." "It is the truth," she said simply. He took a deep breath, his mind racing with possibilities. Whatever choice he made, his life would never be the same again. "I'll need some time to think about it," he said finally. Alira nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "Take all the time you need, Logan. Whatever you choose, know that you have my gratitude and my respect." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Logan allowed himself to relax. He didn't have all the answers yet, but for now, he was content to stand beside Alira, watching as Valara began to heal.